Shri, please proceed.
A very warm afternoon to the galaxy of intellectuals, honorable guests, benevolent faculty members, and spirited finalists. The scent in the air clearly smells with liberty. Ocean Sharma and Chirin Khan presents a big welcome to our guest, Mr. Bharat Chub and Mr. Bhumesh Verma. I am extremely privileged to welcome Mr. Bharat Chub, who has achieved so much at a young age. In 2013, at the age of 23, Sir has secured first rank in the Delhi Judicial Service examination and served as a youngest judge for 3 years. Sir is an expert in the fields like international commercial arbitration, corporate criminal liability, and white collar crime. Sir is also a member of Singapore International Arbitration Center Committee representing India. He is extremely passionate about pro bono lawyering and was also appointed as an amicus curiae in various cases. Besides, I am elated to introduce to you another stalwart in the field of law, Mr. Bhumesh Verma, who has raised the new horizon of legal education. Sir is a graduate from College of Law, UK. Sir has became a part at leading law firms like Khaitan and Company and Link Legal. Sir has more than 400 published articles to the credit, including those on LinkedIn, Business World, and many more. Sir is known for his business acumen and solution-centric approach. Moving on, we also have with us Dr. Nishant Joshi, in charge PIMR Department of Law, and Professor Nakul Singh Chauhan. We welcome you as well. Before proceeding further, I would like to introduce our participants, Deb 36, Ojaswini Oja, who will be speaking for the motion, and Deb 41, Yashaswini Shukla, who will be speaking against the motion. I request both the participants not to disclose the identity of their college to maintain transparency.
Do we have the permission from both the adjudicators to proceed?
You may begin. Yeah.
I would like the person speaking for the motion. Thank you, sir. Thank you. I would like the person speaking for the motion to go first. You have 5 minutes. Please proceed.
Shall I begin, sir?
Sir, 1 minute. Sir, 5 minutes, nahi 6 minutes.
Sorry, my bad. You'll be given 6 minutes. I'm sorry. Ojaswini, you may proceed.
So it mentioned 4 plus 1.
No, sir.
For the finals, it is 6 minutes.
5 plus 1.
Okay, fine. I'm starting now.
Sure.
It is better to understand a little than to misunderstand a lot, because everything unknown is magnified. I defend free testing for India and put forth my first argument on basis of implementation of proactive testing in a developing nation. Along with facing an unprecedented health and humanitarian crisis today, we are a nation where 2/3 population struggles for daily survival. The pandemic has added numbers to it due to shooting unemployment rates and restricted economic activities. An extensive emphasis has been laid upon rapid, massive, and repetitive testing, as this can only be met if it is free. A person tested positive for coronavirus has to undergo testing at least thrice. How can you expect them to pay a minimum price, thrice of the initial cost of the test, that is 4,500, amidst the financial and the medical costs they are already facing? The International Labour Organization's report of wage 2020 has told that India is a country with the average per capita income lying between 3,700 to 5,700. How will we ensure it? Proceeding to my next argument, which denies the skepticism of the private sector in the country. The private players of the pathology getting upset about the court's directive is less convincing. It is a fact that they operate at a cost, but they will be reimbursed is also an equal fact. They just have to respect the genuine reasons for the time lapse. Moreover, sustaining for them shouldn't be a big issue because most of the NABL accredited labs that have been recognized for testing today are actually big pathological chains. If the private sector turns counterproductive today, it is actually losing faith in the constitution of a country that guarantees right to equality and right to life as a fundamental to every citizen. As I begin with my third argument, I will make further three arguments which will define and also defend the feasibility of free tests. First of all, the government knew that the price that has been stipulated by ICMR for the testing, rupees 4,500, is something that most of the population of our country will have to bear the brunt of. It will have many affordability constraints. So the other option than free testing was to give them this amount in their bank accounts, analogous to what the government is doing in the Prime Minister's Jan Kalyan Yojana. But if it would happen this way, then the citizens and the poor people would have been forced to go out of their houses, stand in the long queues, wait for the cash in hand to come in, cash in hand. But this was also defy the sole purpose of the lockdown and isolation. Moreover, even if they have got the amount in their hands, they would have preferred eating rather than testing. This isn't feasible. That is why free testing came up to avoid such situations. Secondly, if we consider free testing as something for a particular bracket, income bracket of people, in the current situation, we will not be able to form real income brackets due to the simultaneous changes in the inflation, and we will not be able to index it. Moreover, we will also not be able to cater the transparency issues which will be related to it. Many of us have listened about the Ayushman Bharat scheme, and even the registration for it are open. But most of the countrymen do not have access to sufficient bandwidth and digital infrastructure that they can go and register for it. Traveling within the lockdowns or going to a particular agent is also not possible. That is why the free testing has marked its importance in this time. We are a country where only 45% people are insured, medically insured basically. We have a very low insurance penetration in our country. And moreover, these 45% people are the ones, most of them are the ones working in the private sector and are insured with the pool insurance group policy that their company undertakes, and else are the ones which have recently done with the Ayushman Bharat scheme. But what about the other 55% people? We are a country which has already had a less percentage of the GDP allocated for the healthcare services, which is way lesser than the global average of 6%. In such situation, we had to take free testing to ensure accessibility and equity for all citizens. The current situation is analogous to the Protagoras' paradox, life versus livelihood. Our government has opted for a policy of people first and has extended hands of help to other nations also. Do you think that the frontline corona warriors are fighting the pandemic because they are ensured about the financial assistance? No, it has a sense of service towards the economy and the nation which is in crisis. Moreover, my dear friends, I would also like to say that it is not the time when the private sector has to get demotivated. What is needed is trust. Trust in the economy, trust in the government that it will revamp. This is not how a mixed economy works. Today, a private-public collaboration is need of an hour for conducive, sustained growth. Hence, at last, I would just like to say that let us believe the indigenous capabilities of our country. Like we are producing. At last, I would just like to say that free testing is very important for our country.
Okay. I now request Yashaswini to proceed for her arguments against the motion. For the adjudicators, Yashaswini is DEP 41. That's her code. DEP 41.
Thank you, sir. I'll start at the count of 3, 2, 1. And then I'll request the timekeeper to begin the time then after. 3, 2, 1. Good afternoon, everyone. I strongly stand against the motion. According to me, free medical testing of COVID-19 in India is not justified. And to support my case, I would like to put forward 4 main arguments. To begin with, my very first argument is heterogeneity within the economically weaker section of country. It has been rightly observed by my opponent friend, and this is the reality that a significant part of the population of India is poor. But simultaneously, we will have to take this into consideration that out of this poor population, within this economically weaker section, there are further subcategories of poor depending upon the level of poverty. What we have opted under the free medical testing policy right now is a very generalized categorization of the people into simply economically weaker section and non-economically weaker section. And just on the basis of that, we are trying to distribute the free testing benefits. Rather than going for this, it is better to go for it in a progressive way. That is, everyone should be charged for the test, but they should pay according to their ability, according to the earnings that they are making. This will be helpful in the long run for the reason that this will not come as a burden over the people who are paying for the test because they're paying according to their ability. And secondly, it will provide finances, the funds, the basic funds that are needed to sustain the private healthcare sector, the economy, as well as the government. This forms the basis of the next 3 arguments I will propose on the table. So moving towards my second argument. The second argument is about the functionality of the private healthcare sector. The government involved the private healthcare sector as a stakeholder with the very objective of increasing the level of testing in the country, and the need of increasing the testing is rising every day. But what is happening in the current scenario of free medical testing is that this is creating impediment for the private laboratories. We have to recognize this, that there is certain basic cost which is incurred at every test, and this cost remains inevitable because that comes from the PPE kits or the testing kits that are to be borne even in the case when the private laboratories are fully prepared and willing to sacrifice all their profits. Unfortunately, the scenario of the country is such that the government has yet not come up with any concrete assurance for the reimbursement of payments. And secondly, it is also important to look into this matter that according to a study that was held by FICCI and Ernst & Young in a collaborative effort, it had concluded that due to this COVID-19, this laboratory and the healthcare sector is facing a loss of around approximately 80% of its patients as well as revenues. So these are enough to infer that in this situation, even when a private laboratory is having enough philanthropic as well as patriotic call, it cannot move forward because of the lack of the finances. We are compelling it to withdraw. And this is the gravest issue involved. When we are compelling it to withdraw, the government or India is failing in its very objective of increasing the testing capacity, which we are very well aware that the government can't go for it all on its own. Then moving towards the third argument. It is regarding the economy and the role that the healthcare sector can play over there. We know that economy is suffering from a major setback globally as well as nationally. In this circumstance, there are few industries that have the potential to support the economy not only during this COVID-19 crisis, but it is also possible in the post-COVID-19 world. And in this regard, healthcare industry it just definitely gives us a hopeful future. What we are doing is that at a time when we need its maximum support, we are discouraging it from coming into the mainstream because of the ways the free medical testing is being carried out. And secondly, when we are forcing these, when these conditions are forcing the private laboratories to withdraw, they have to also lay off a number of small and the middle income group people who are dependent upon these private laboratories. And this definitely has its social as well as economic repercussion in the longer run. Because when these people are getting removed from there, there is definitely a reduction in the testing capacity and the burden is increasing. So at this time when the government has to also make effort to save the jobs it can save and to also take care of the future, how we are going to emerge out of this crisis and how we have to function both within and in the coming days, it is very important that we take care of the private healthcare sector as well. Now moving towards my final argument, it is regarding the fiscal deficit. We know that the sources of the revenue for the government have shrunk really badly because it can't ask for taxes right now. It is going for the deferred payments, and that is what is the need of the hour. Simultaneously, the expenditure outlets have increased exponentially considering the magnitude of this pandemic and this crisis. Also, it is going for the loans and we have to pay the interest later on. In all this country, when everyone is paying according to his or her ability, we are making the little contribution that we can make, but that's a collective contribution that is going to help us in the long run. Ultimately, when I just conclude, I want to convey this, that it is necessary to go for a progressive way of charging for the test, because it helps us to sustain in the long run and also in the present crisis. We know that we are in such a situation, in such a battle, which we ourselves are not aware how long it's going to last. So we cannot deny the cause of finance over here. We will have to consider it because we have to fight this long battle. And lastly, I would just like to say that definitely the need of the hour is to be strongly compassionate. But what we also need is to just add up the rational thought in this sense of compassion and the sense of call by the nation, because rationality and compassion will together lead to the results that will be successful, that will be rewarding in the long run, when the battle that is standing at the door is such a long one. So with these words, thank you.
I would like to ask the adjudicators whether they want the rebuttal round first, or whether you would want your points of clarification or points of information right now.
I'd like to ask Yashaswini something.
Okay, sir. Please proceed.
If I may.
Yes,
Yes,
and sir, she will have 90 seconds to respond.
Right. Yashaswini, yes, we may not have faced an earth-shattering event like this for
Yes,
about 100 years. And this pandemic has affected all, rich and the poor, urban, rural, and so on. It doesn't see any, social strata, religion, economic stature, and so on and so forth. So how do we ensure parity? What you've made very good arguments towards your cause, that the labs cannot survive without money trickling in through these test charges. But how does it percolate to the downtrodden, someone who cannot afford? How do we distinguish who is needy and who is not? How do we monitor it?
so
How do you decide who is eligible for this sort of, who can, simply stating who can afford to pay, who cannot afford to pay? There could be some people, and even going forward in next few days, majority of the people who cannot pay or who have not received government transfers.
Yes, sir. So I think
Yes.
that here, regarding what I was suggesting, that we go for progressive way of charging for the test, the first thing that gets clear here is that the one who will be the poorest of the poorest doesn't need to pay. And secondly, regarding that, how we will decide who is poor, who deserves it, and who doesn't deserve it. So I feel that the government, the ruling government, had made efforts prior to this crisis regarding digitalization and helping the unorganized sector to get organized by registration through various means, be it ration cards or be it the Aadhaar cards. That can be used. And something which is very important right now for at every front wherever we are fighting this war is the coordination between all the departments and all the states to recognize this. Because when I propose this, that we have to go for progressive charging for the test, we have to also definitely take into concern that there are people who are getting unemployed, who were employed and getting good salaries, they are getting unemployed. So here I think that the whole machinery needs a proper coordination, and with the help of proper coordination, it can definitely be done. Because with what we are having right now, like we are securing these benefits to the Ayushman Bharat Yojana beneficiaries, there also we need this machinery to work to secure transparency. So just a little more effort will also secure that we get the finances, the basic finances that can sustain us in the long run. So that is according to me approaching the problem in a more concentrated and effective way.
Well, I need not agree, but yes, good points. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, Bharat, maybe you would have some questions.
I've got a question for Ojaswini. I think it's only fair that we ask the other speaker also something.
Yes.
So my question to you is, I reserve my comments, of course, to you and the other speaker a little later. But to your arguments, a libertarian would have a problem with those. he would say that every human being or every organization works on the basis of some incentives, right? Businessman does not set a business because of the goodness of his heart. He does not do it as a means of charity. But we do understand when people set up businesses, when they do something which is productive to people at large, and they also make a profit in the whole bargain, it also inures to the benefit of people. For example, there is a double thank you moment that we talk about when we are studying libertarianism, where if you need a service and I come and fulfill that need and you pay me for it, we both go home happy. And I've done it for profit, you've done it for something that you need. And because of this purely commercial transaction, people sort of benefit. So a libertarian would say that once you have asked the labs to do it for free, or you have asked the labs to do it for a payment that is going to come much, much later, you have taken the incentive out for the labs to really ramp up their capacity, to really go out there, put themselves in harm's way and do this testing with an expectation of return in the future, with no immediate payment. And we all of us understand how the government payments come in and the time that they take. So my argument to you, or my question to you, would be that you are taking the incentive away. And when you take the incentive away, not only would you have the private labs cutting corners, making excuses for not doing these tests, you would also prevent other players from coming to the market and doing these tests, which is the need of the hour. Because by regulating it, by socializing it, so to speak, you have taken the incentive away. What's your response to that?
So first of all, I would say that I partially agree with all of your points, but the urgency of the time states that when a pandemic or a disease does not knock a door before company coming, they will not ask that are you a libertarian or a conservative, or are you rich or are you poor. So the basic point which I had was that these private organizations were called to ramp up the testing capabilities, and they have been counterproductive, and this is sad. Why I say they shouldn't have done this, because every private organization, a business organization, has certain plans before they start up anything. They have a sector, they have a segment called contingent liability, and this contingent liability can dawn upon any time. It is really hard for me to believe that any business organization does not prepare before for such things which can happen which can happen in emergent times. Moreover, if you talk about incentive, the profit is a big incentive which drives the economy, which drives so many things. But life is more important currently. I'm not saying just to hang upon life and just not be prudential about it. We have to have a prudential take. But what I'm suggesting is the economy operates on expectations, and expectations are based on trust. If today the economy also, there is a very sheep-like movement. If we'll see somebody disinvesting, the other people will also start disinvesting. So the big private players currently have to show trust in the government, collaborate with it, so that we can revamp the economy. So I hope my arguments sufficed for it.
Yeah, let's move ahead. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, do we have your permission to proceed with the rebuttal round?
Sure, go ahead.
Sure.
Thank you, sir. So I would now invite Ojaswini again to begin with her rebuttal, and then we will move to Yashaswini. Before we, sorry?
Starting with my argument, sorry.
Okay. Before we proceed, Oshin, how much time do they have for rebuttal? You'll have to unmute, Oshin.
Sir, it's 4 minutes, 3 plus 1.
Okay. So for rebuttal, you have 4 minutes. And I would now request Ojaswini to proceed with her rebuttal, and then Yashaswini's rebuttal will follow.
First of all, congratulations, Yashaswini, for putting forward your points. The emphasis has always been on free testing to combat the pandemic, but there has been one thing more very important, that is misinformation. So as you stated about FICCI, the survey actually says 80% of the Indian companies face a decline in cash flow. It has not directly towards the private pathological surveys. Moreover, it is the time of March 2020 when we just started to face the pandemic, and there was no indigenous production of the testing kits, no indigenous production of the PPE kits. And it said decline in cash flow of the Indian companies, 50% of which is due to the lack of the restrictive operations. So please do correct that point. Moreover, when talking about you stated that heterogeneity of people, heterogeneity of poor people in the country, that is something which can only be addressed to free testing, my dear friend, because we will have transparency issues, and this is not prudent. You even compare it to the progressive tax system we have. I can take the whole day to discuss the demerits of this private sector, this progressive taxation, because we live in a country where every day millions of people fall to the BPL line from the APL. And it is very and even sir said that it is very difficult to understand that which people are needy at the current point, because need for life is important. And if we take something related to their financial capabilities, then it won't be justified. Moreover, coming to your concern about the private laboratories, I would restate that these are big firms. The NABL credited firms are big firms, and they always have a plan for contingent liability. They are operating in a dynamic environment, which always actually ensures that they have to be ready for facing such emergent conditions. You also said that we need to be prudent in our approach. Sooner or a little time later, we are going to open the lockdown partially. The Niti Aayog has also said that mostly till July, we will be opening many of the activities. Here, we will again need to ramp up the testing, and people are already facing the financial burden. How will they go and conduct the test if it is not free? They will just start earning, and they will feed their families first, and not that. Many people in our country, if they have to choose between feeding themselves or having and taking a health service, they actually choose the former one. They have to feed their bellies first. Secondly, I also want to stress on a fact that I will again say that economy is working on expectations. And if we lose the trust and we don't have a collaborative effort of the private and the public sector, we will face a crisis which is even more harsh than that. So if the private sectors today get demotivated and draw their investments, causing leakages to the to the economy, we will lead to a fall in consumer demand, investment, and further fall in our GDP. The best thing is to trust each other and suppose a full-fledged fight against the pandemic so that this mayhem ends soon. And what do you think, if nationalizing of the private sector could have been done, would it be a better solution?
Okay. I would now request Yashaswini to proceed with her rebuttal. You have 4 minutes.
Just a second, sir. I'm just starting. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Congratulations to you too, my dear friend. I will be rebutting all the arguments that have come up in your substantial speech, the rebuttal, and also in the question answer round that was with the adjudicators. So moving ahead, the very first argument that came from my dear friend was that private players will be reimbursed. But we have to see that government has yet not come up with any initiative. And we are in such a mode of urgency that we can't wait the government to come up with the finances and then the private laboratories will be going with the test. It is something that has to be done simultaneously. And those finances will have to be provided immediately because that is the very basic cause they are asking for. Then moving ahead, one of the arguments that come from your side is that these are the big pathological chains and there won't be any issue of finances when they have to function in this time of crisis. I can agree, I will agree that there are certain big private laboratories that are working, but they are only few. We have to take the whole case into consideration, and when we are involving private sector and the need to increase the test is rising every day, especially in the time when we are preparing to uplift the lockdown, we will have to also include the middle and the small size laboratories, and we are looking forward towards it. So how are they going to sustain? Can we just rely that there are just few big firms and we will be able to fight this such a big battle? Then moving ahead, you raised the transparency issues regarding what I was proposing, that we will be charging the people in a progressive manner. So I'll just say that this is an inherent flaw of the executive machinery that would also exist in the case which is right now. We can't even assure that all the beneficiaries of Ayushman Bharat will be getting free testing. We even don't know that everyone would deserves it has got covered. So this transparency issue is always there, and this can be corrected in both the cases with the help of executive machinery. So I don't find it a very rational argument to counter what I was proposing. And then definitely you rose that you can we can have a debate on what are the faults and the demerits of progressive taxation, but that is definitely not the topic of debate today, so I won't get into it. Moving ahead, then there is that how can we expect that there is no company who's not having some funds for the unprecedented circumstances? Yes, definitely. When an organization works, it allocates some funds for the unexpected losses that may be incurred and the other factors. But no one prepares for such a big level loss. There may be few big firms who would claim that they have, and I don't guess even the big firms can claim such in this circumstance. This is an unprecedented crisis for the nations, for the best of the firms of the world. So no one prepares so well for such an unexpected and unprecedented crisis. Then moving ahead, one argument that come from my side, from the side of my friend, was that regarding the FICCI surveys, that it didn't imply the pathological sector in the healthcare sector. This is very much possible, and that is, I think, what has happened, that you have read some part of it and I have read some part of it. I was reading the analysis that it had done for healthcare sector, and it was through the columns of an esteemed daily that I had put forward the arguments. Yeah, you said that this was an analysis that was made just in the month of March. Okay, it's fine that if it was made in the month of March, but we cannot deny the fact that even when we are in the month of May, these laboratories are facing a loss of finance because people aren't coming for the conventional tests, and even people aren't coming for the other tests that they would have come for in the times when we did not have the COVID. Then you just said that people will prefer feeding their belly before their health because there is a significant section of population who is so. So I would just say that it is also not necessary that if we make something free, people will be compulsorily going. People will be having enough incentive for going for the test. Making it free doesn't equate to making it compulsory. And then lastly, you asked that should we have gone for nationalization of private sector? I guess that would have been a further mystery. It would have caused a further mystery because the very limited incentive that is left with private sector, that too would have been withdrawn. So definitely we would not have gone for the nationalization of private sector. And as it has come from your side only, we are a mixed economy and have been a successful mixed economy since long. With that, thanks.
I would now invite the adjudicators to again pose some questions to our debaters. What we can do is, Bhushan sir has already asked a question to one of the participants. I guess he has already spoken to Yashaswini. So I request Bhushan sir to ask a question to Ojaswini and Bharat sir to ask a question to Yashaswini, if that is fine.
Oh, well, I don't have any further questions. Okay. I'm fine.
Okay. Bharat sir? Sir, you are muted. You'll have to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I do have a question for Yashaswini. I mean, during the entirety of the speech, I haven't, heard you talking about corporate social responsibility at all.
Sir, I can't hear your voice. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Please allow me to restate that. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear it better.
Perfect. Thank you. So, in your, I mean, you are defending the companies and the private labs as to why they should not be burdened with the requirement or the mandate of testing for free or testing or ramping up. But that aside, I haven't heard you talk about corporate social responsibility at all. The point that I'm trying to put to you is that when a company becomes big enough, or when an organization becomes big enough, of course, it is working for profit at the end of the day. But there is something that you need to give back to the society, which has given you certain rights and privileges as a company. And every company, and we all understand as law students and otherwise that a company is only liable for the shares and for the assets that it has. There is no personal liability for the individuals who are at the helm of the company. So,
yes, sir.
And in bargain for that, for getting that benefit of a limited liability, the companies also have to give back in some way or the other. So what do you say? I mean, if I say that this is a part of your corporate social responsibility, what's your response to that?
So that's very rightly observed point that this is a part of the corporate social responsibility. And I just appreciate the private sector that it has come up with full support for the government sector when it was regarding making the provisions for the manpower or the equipment, or also there have been private sector coming forward making efforts to make the indigenous testing kits so that the price falls down. So they are coming up with it, and that is appreciable. But we can also not deny that there are certain constraints that always work with a firm, however large or small it is. They have to pay salaries, the basic salaries they have to pay. Even the people who are working there, they are dependent on it. And I mentioned it in the speech that a large population also comes from the small and the middle income groups. So when we are assuring social justice to one part of the population, that really doesn't mean that we will just deny that social justice principle to other part of population just for the reason that it is slightly better off than that population. So it is responding to its call of nation or the social responsibility, but it cannot go beyond certain constraints. And when government has to involve the private sector, it will have to take care of that basic requirement. And that was the whole thing that I was proposing and I was advocating for, that this compassion has to come with a rational thought. And that rational thought has to be shown both on the side of the private sector as well as the public sector.
Fair enough, Mr. Shukla. Would you have some statistics to show how much of the market share is occupied by the relatively larger players, and how much of the market share in labs and diagnostics is taken by the relatively smaller players, which you think would be at a greater risk if this is implemented?
So I don't have the precise accounts with me, so I won't prefer mentioning it because I'm not having the precise details, but I'll just definitely add one point that we know that healthcare sector was one of those sectors that received the least attention from the government in the past years. That's hardly 1.4% of GDP that we have spent in our healthcare sector. And it's now that we have just realized that how important healthcare is. So in that scenario, it's around 60 to 70% that comes I'll just complete this line, that comes only from the public sector. So from the private sector, we need a coordination and collective effort.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any further questions from the adjudicators?
And from me, thank you.
Okay. Bhushan sir, any further questions from your end? Sir, you are muted. You'll have to unmute yourself.
No further questions.
Okay. Shri, please proceed.
Now, I request Professor Nakul Singh Chauhan to please present a vote of thanks to the stalwarts of the field. Sir, please.
Thank you, Shri. On behalf of Prestige Institute of Management and Research, Department of Law, Indore, I would like to extend my gratitude to Mr. Bharat Chugh and Mr. Bhushan Verma for taking out time from the busy schedules to be here with us and adjudicate this round. Thank you so much, sir, for being here with us. I would also like to thank the participants and congratulate them for their impeccable performance. And I wish them all the best for the future. Both of you are already the winners because one of you would be the winner and one of you would be the runner-up of the competition. So my congratulations to you in advance. And I would also request you to attend the valedictory session. I hope Bharat sir will be joining us for the valedictory session as well. So once again, I extend a very warm thank you from the Institute to our adjudicators. And I would in the end also like to thank the student committee that worked day in and out to make this event a success. And finally, the management of the Institute, without whose consent and without whose support, it would have been impossible to host such an event at such a large scale. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us today.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
All right, bye.